Hi everyone, this is Daisy Pilarda. Welcome to my week 4 discussion 1 post about plea bargaining. In plea bargaining, a defendant is faced with a charge at arraignment. Typically, this is the maximum charge or punishment that the defendant will be held to if he or she goes to trial. The prosecutors will present the defendant with an opportunity to plead guilty to a lesser charge or to the original charge with less than the maximum sentence. Plea bargaining is a process by which the prosecution and the defense negotiate charging and sentencing concessions in exchange for the defendant's guilty plea and waiver of rights. In the resources that were given to us, there were two different bargaining types that were brought up, which was charge bargaining, where the court offers to dismiss charges if the defendant pleads guilty to certain other charges. And then there was also sentence bargaining, when the court offers a lesser charge under the condition of a guilty plea from the defendant. It is argued that plea bargaining effectively utilizes resources when taking in consideration the growing criminal caseload versus the non-expanding criminal justice system. To do a jury trial for every single case would put an extreme stress on the criminal justice system. There are concerns that plea bargaining can influence an innocent defendant to accept a punishment in order to avoid a severe punishment when they plead innocent. There are quite a few people who have been sentenced when they were innocent. Plea bargaining validity will depend on three critical components: a conscience waiver of rights, the waiver must be voluntary, and the criminal charges must have an actual factual basis. Plea bargaining does require defendants to waive their three rights, which is what those three critical components are, is the defendant waiving their three rights protected by the Fifth and Sixth Amendments, which is the right to a jury trial, the right against self-incrimination, and the right to confront witnesses. In some jurisdictions, prosecutors and defendants can work with judges to predetermine what sentence the defendants will get if the defendants accept plea bargains. In most jurisdictions, however, the judge's role in plea bargaining is limited. For example, federal judges retain final authority over sentencing decisions and are not bound by prosecutors' recommendations, even if the recommendations are part of plea bargains. Similarly, federal judges may not be directly involved in plea bargain negotiations. I believe that if the justice system was perfect in the sense of ensuring they knew beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was guilty, that plea bargaining would be absolutely fair. There are a lot of people currently doing time for something they were not necessarily proved by pure fact that they committed the crime. For the most part, I do believe it saves resources to do plea bargaining, but people are always subject to admitting to things that they didn't do to avoid a severe sentence. In that, if you plead innocence and face a trial, you are putting yourself at risk for the maximum sentence possible for whatever that crime was. A lot of people don't feel like that is worth the risk, because there are a lot of people who went away to prison based on evidence that wasn't factual. A lot of trials are driven by emotion and, a lot of trials are driven by emotion and bias, and unfortunately people who attend the jury lie. There's a lot of factors that are really hard to control, and a lot of people don't think that that's worth it. And if you plead guilty and receive a lesser sentence, it can seem like a trade-off, and that's why people see it as like coercion into a guilty plea. So there is that element of it. It's hard to say if I agree or disagree with that, because it happens. And if it happens, then it's true. But I also don't want to say that I believe that those people were totally innocent, because we don't have the facts. But I think that if the justice system was perfect, the way we wish it was, that plea bargaining would be fine. I don't think that it would be unconstitutional because they are right. It takes a lot of resources to run a full trial with a jury, costs a lot of money, takes a lot of time, and there's a huge criminal caseload versus a very small criminal justice system. So I personally agree in that aspect that plea bargaining is needed. There also is another element, however, that some people believe it lets criminals get away with lesser sentences when they deserve a more harsh sentence to tailor the crime. I really think that lies within the eyes of the beholder, because I personally see it as it's appropriate to commend someone's honesty because it saves time, saves money, and it's going to take a lot more resources to prove somebody guilty when they're claiming innocence. And some people may think it's avoidance of properly dealing with the situation and taking a criminal off the streets. But if we just keep focusing on only putting people away, crime is always going to happen. And all we're going to do is increase how many inmates we have. And that overcrowding is already a problem that we have. I mean, that's a whole nother beast that I don't want to get into. But everything has its consequences. And I think that the trade-off of giving someone a lesser sentence because they just admitted that they were guilty is fine. But I also think that, in those instances that people, factually they're guilty and they want to claim innocence anyway, it's our opportunity to not condone behavior as long as it's factual. Sometimes it's not factual, which isn't okay. And we've talked about that in this class. So, plea bargaining, perfectly fine. To me, in a factual world. If that makes sense. I understand that people might have questions about that, and probably some good arguments for it. And I'm excited to hear. So please post any comments, questions below, and I'll be willing to expand. You might even change my mind. Who knows? I've thought about it for quite some time. So just let me know, and thank you for watching.